So thanks for coming. Today's session is what's new with the Lync Windows 8 client. My name is Brian Stucker. I am the project owner for the Windows 8 client. So I'm responsible for making sure that it works right and it does what you guys need it to do. I've been with Microsoft for about 6 years. I've been in the industry about 17 years for telecom. So, you know, all the phones you see out front at the check-in desk, those Nortel phones, those are ones I built when I was at Nortel. So, been around a bit. Previously owned all the Lync mobile clients, so all those great mobile clients that you saw brought out last year. If you were here last year, you're going to see me doing that. And before that, owned various pieces of the desktop client. So if you guys have any questions or anything after the session, something that you might not have gotten to for Ask the Experts or just popped into your mind overnight, feel free to ask me a range of questions on pretty much any of the clients. And if I can't answer it, I can probably tell you who to talk to. So without further ado, we'll get started. Since you guys, this is the second day, and you've already seen some of the demos and such, I'm going to try and skip ahead here a little bit and go to something that is probably a little more interesting to you. So obviously you've heard our pitch about Lync working across different platforms and devices, and one of those platforms is obviously Windows. And in Windows 8 and now 8.1, there's the modern experience that we have primarily for touch devices. I use a wide range of devices in my day-to-day experience. I use Surface devices. I have a desktop. I have phones, and so one of the things that's unique about this particular client, the Windows 8 client, is that it's one of the few pieces of software at Microsoft that has to be designed from the get-go to run on such a wide array of devices. We literally have to do design and testing for devices that are as small as 7 inches or 8 inches if you get like a Dell Venue tablet, all the way up to this monster, which is 82 inches. And we have to make sure that the experience works well across that entire range. That said, we do recognize that a lot of people still do a lot of their productivity related tasks in the Win32 environment. And that's why we have a great desktop client there that really works well for people that want to quickly go back and forth between tasks and want to keep a bunch of windows or conversations going at the same time. So in terms of what we've done for the Windows 8 client, although we're not against having mouse and keyboard users, I'm one of them, I use it all the time on mouse and keyboard, is we are primarily bent towards touch devices, so things that have more of a touch experience. If you've run the 8.1 client on a mouse and keyboard computer, it's not quite as fluid as it would be if you were just running the regular Lync desktop client in terms of being able to move back and forth between tasks. And that's primarily because of the way that the OS behaves. But if you tried to run the Win32 client, say on a Surface device or on your Dell Venue, it'll run just fine, but all of the UI controls are really tiny. They're not laid out for touch quite as well. If you rotate the device, it doesn't understand that you've rotated the device. And so that's really where the Windows Store app comes to play the best and fills that niche the best, is when you're dealing with devices that you can physically toss at somebody, that rotation is important, touch is important. And so that's really where we play in terms of the working across platforms and devices. So in terms of what we've been adding, we've had several releases. We've had 4 releases of the client since it first came out. We're preparing to have a 5th that's coming out probably towards the end of next month. We're wrapping it up. The demos that I'll do today are on yesterday's build of the client. So aside from a few engineers in the test org, you guys are going to be the first people to see it. In fact, I haven't even gone through all of the stuff that's in the build. So hopefully we don't hit any glitches. I'm pretty confident we won't. I just blew it up right there. But you know, this is the latest bits that we're showing. So some of the stuff that we're adding right now is we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the affordances that we have from the OS. For instance, on a touch device, you're going to spend a lot more time in the start screen than you might on a keyboard device. And so we want to make sure you have a really good experience there. So one of the things that we're adding is one touch to join. And the experience that we're doing here is we're introducing secondary tiles. Now, if you're not familiar with secondary tiles with Windows, apps can publish primary tiles and secondary tiles. So every app that you install gets a primary tile. It's just the thing that you go to launch the app. Apps can also generate secondary tiles, which you can then pin to the start screen. So some of the things that we're adding are the ability to pin a join link. So this is pretty cool. What it allows you to do is, if you've used the Windows 8.1 client for Lync, you'll know that there's a little box in the screen, which we'll see in a minute, that says, hey, this is your next meeting, right? And you can touch that and it goes straight into your meeting. You don't even have to go into the meeting details, nothing, it's just straight in. And so we've extended that out to the start screen. So what this allows you to do is pretty much anywhere in the OS, all you have to do is hit Windows and then either touch or click that join button and you're immediately in your next meeting. Now, we don't want people just joining meetings that are 8 hours in advance, right? Just because they didn't look at the tile. Or sometimes you may want to do something ad hoc. So for instance, on the desktop client, there's this concept of Meet Now, which I'm not sure if you guys have ever found, because it's buried. It's really buried in the client. You have to click on the little options gear, and then there's a fly-out menu, and you click Meet Now, and the thing's in there. Right. So we were asking ourselves, you know, why is this so buried? It's really handy to have this functionality available as a first-class citizen. So we just exposed it. If you don't have anything scheduled, like a Lync meeting scheduled, then what we do is, instead of just showing you some meeting that's far off in the future or saying you don't have anything right now, that tile becomes a Meet Now experience, and I'll show that in a minute. So that makes it very easy for you to start a meeting and add people into the meeting experience very quickly. The next tile that we've added is this meetings list, and the meetings list tile is also pretty handy. You can use the calendar app and get a list of things that are in your calendar, but the thing that's nice about this, and I definitely use this on a daily basis, is that I can see all the meetings that are coming up that are Lync meetings, things that I'm probably going to have to prepare for, or I'm going to need to join. For instance, here I know at 3 o'clock there's a bug bash on our software. At 4 o'clock I have another meeting that's coming up. And so that gives me, again, at a glance, awareness of what's going on with my meetings. And again, that's available from anywhere in the OS. All you have to do is hit the Windows button. There's the tile. You can see what's going on. You can hit the Windows button again and go back to whatever you were doing. So that's pretty handy. If you were to tap that tile, which we'll show in a minute, it goes into the meetings environment. So even though it doesn't go straight into a meeting because it's a list of meetings, there's some functionality there. And both of these are live tiles. So if you sit on the start screen and you wait and meetings change, new things come in, time passes and it's now time for some event to be joined, you'll see the tiles update in a live manner. So that's pretty nice. And it's something that we can do because of Windows 8. Another thing that we're really interested in ensuring that, yeah, sure.
I'm just thinking of the answer, but the meetings, the schedules, they still come from after we change, right?
They do. Yep. The next thing that we've added is we know that when we shipped the client, the last few increments that we shipped, we were geared primarily towards a participant experience. So, if you were joining a meeting with the Windows 8 client, you were getting a nice touch experience that's optimized primarily for devices like Surface. That's better than you might get in terms of the native experience than a web meeting, right? There are some feature differences between the two. But in general, that's what you were getting, is a participant experience. So it's time to start adding more. We want to make sure that not only can you participate in a meeting well, we want to make sure that you can actually run a meeting well in the client. And so what we're, next month, when we update the client, what we'll be adding are a bunch of presenter controls. So you'll be able to admit and deny participants from the lobby, which you couldn't do before. You'll be able to promote, demote, mute attendees, do all those fun things so that you can actually keep control of what's going on in the meeting. We have audience controls, so mute and unmute of the audience. And you can view and control shared Lync meeting content. So if you haven't had a chance to run the client that we shipped in December, one of the things that we added there was you can still only view a shared desktop, but we added the ability to control it. So now you can request control of a remote desktop and actually control that experience from the modern client, which is pretty nice. The other thing that we've added is you can do content navigation. So you saw that yesterday. Derek was displaying that, where he ran some of the keynote doing synchronous and asynchronous navigation of PowerPoint slides. And the last thing that you probably won't hear very many people talk about, but actually I feel like is pretty important, is that we're doing a lot of work to make sure that the client is more accessible and that the controls are more discoverable. One of the things that we did when we released the client and Windows 8 came out is we basically took advantage of every paradigm we could in Windows 8, it seems like. And so that's actually created a few problems for us. For instance, the call controls are off the screen. And so if you wanted to mute yourself or hang up, you actually had to edge swipe off the bottom of the device to bring those controls up. People have a hard time remembering edge swipes. And so even if you know that it's there, you have to think. You have to stop and think, wait, how do I do this? Oh yeah, I got to edge swipe, and then take the action. And so we're wanting to make sure that users don't have to do that. We also want to make sure that people who maybe have low vision or no vision that need to use the client, I mean, that's really, really hard if you can't actually see the device very well to try and figure out how to swipe controls in. So we're doing work to make sure that things are on the canvas and that they're very accessible. And the Windows 8 client is well known in Microsoft, actually, for being very, very compliant to CVA standards, accessibility standards, and we do take that seriously. So we get a lot of feedback from users. We do a lot of testing to make sure that the thing actually works as well as we can make it, make sure the narration works, et cetera. And so that's something that that's pretty important to us, is to make sure that the client is accessible. Some of the other stuff that we've done, again, just catching you up if you haven't used the app recently. In Windows 8, you could only run the app in certain sizes. So you could run the app in 50/50 in some places, or you could run the app in a snap view, and some parts of the client would work well in snap view. If you got into, I believe, a conversation, it would pop you out into full screen. Which was not the best experience that we wanted, but it was what we could get out the door to ship. In Windows 8.1, the OS actually changed so that there's an infinite number, well, not truly infinite, but a wide range of sizes that you can run the app in. So you can run from 320 pixels all the way up to whatever the size the screen is on a single monitor. And so we had to do a lot of work to make sure that we had a good experience, so that if you ran the client in a particular size, that everything scaled down correctly, that the conversation controls scaled. And you saw that yesterday as well during the keynote, where Derek was resizing some of the content on the screen, and it reacted properly. Another thing that we needed to do was last year, more devices came out that actually have a portrait orientation. So the Surface device is primarily a landscape orientation. And with the smaller devices coming out, they're portrait orientation. So it wouldn't be a very good experience if you had to constantly turn the device 90 degrees in order to use it. And so we had to do a lot of work around that. things like making sure that the UI reflows correctly, making sure that the video works correctly. So if you're talking to somebody and you rotate the device, that the video actually turns the appropriate way. That was a fun one. We found that a lot of the we didn't have a problem on the Surface devices, and we didn't have a problem on the Nokia devices. But there were some devices that we actually got that we found that they had mounted the camera 90 degrees off in the actual hardware. So we had to do some specific testing and work around some of the devices to actually, oh, this is a X device, and the camera is mounted 90 degrees off in the hardware, so we need to make adjustments for that. So that's some of the things that we're always having to test to make sure that work well. It's across a wide range of devices and form factors. We also added better notifications. So now we have the ability to answer voice and video calls from the toast, so you can see that here. And we added the ability to answer incoming calls over the Windows lock screen. So the Win32 client can't do this. This is something that's afforded to, that is leveraged by and afforded to Skype Modern and Lync Modern. Those are the only two apps that I know of right now that currently leverage this ability to answer calls over the Windows lock screen. So that's pretty nice, particularly on devices that are running on Modern, because there's no HID controls on Modern. And so that means if you have multiple audio devices, the ability to switch between some of those audio devices is restricted currently. And so being able to answer calls on the Windows lock screen becomes kind of important, because you don't want to have to unlock and then start fiddling around with audio devices in order to answer a call. You just want to be able to answer it directly. So you can do that if you choose, or you can turn that off if you don't want that. And it also means that you can have, even for a desktop user, you can have a nice experience, because if your machine is locked, you don't have to quickly unlock it in order to answer a call. You can just answer it straight on the lock screen. And then finally, in Windows 8.1, they added the ability to set quiet hours. This is a nice feature. Funny story, I had Skype running on an iPad, and I had not set quiet hours on my iPad. I'd traveled to London, and it had a client running on it. And one of my coworkers, whom my wife had not ever met or heard of, started sending me IMs trying to figure out where I was in the office in London. Unfortunately, that was 4 a.m. local time to my wife. And so she woke up with a bunch of nice IM notifications binging at her for some strange woman trying to track me down in London. So that was a fun day for me. And so the ability to control when you want to be interrupted or not interrupted is pretty important. And given that this is a communications client, you may want to be able to be interrupted when other applications on the device can't. And so we give you the ability to control that as well. So let's go into a bit of a demo here. Let's get this going, so you can see what we're talking about. All right, come around here. I get the big device. I like the big device. Okay, so one of the things I was talking about are these live tiles. So this is my current calendar. I obviously don't have any Lync meetings scheduled right now because I'm here talking with you. And so if I wanted to come in and I've pinned the tiles and I wanted to do the Meet Now experience, I can just hit Meet Now. It's connecting me. Once it's connected, it does one other thing that's nice, which is when you join a Meet Now, you probably want to meet with somebody else. And so we pop out the participants panel. We make it very easy for you to join. So you can either just go through whatever your contact list is, whatever you have going on there, or if you want, you can type in and add a user. Very, very simple experience, and you're in the meeting. And so that makes it very easy, particularly when you're on a touch device like a Surface or something like that, where you may not have a keyboard. You don't want to sit there and type around. The on-screen keyboard is good, but you want to kind of minimize the amount of time that you're spending sitting there typing on glass if you can. And even for the desktop users, this is kind of a nice experience because chances are if you're meeting with somebody on an ad hoc basis, it's probably somebody you know, and it means they're probably somebody that's already in your contact list. So why drop you into an experience that's like, okay, here's a conversation window, you go figure it out. And you know, we want to make sure that we're thinking through the scenarios in full and trying to make sure that it's a good experience. So things like that. You can see that we have all the conversation controls on screen. One of the reasons that we brought the conversation controls on screen isn't just because it's not accessible or not easy to remember these edge swipes. This client runs on devices like this one. And if you see, there's a bezel on here. And it's kind of hard to do an edge swipe over a bezel. And so if I had to do an edge swipe down here, it'd be very difficult to do it. So if I'm running on a nice PPI display like we have here today, all of my controls are down here at a nice comfortable level. The other things that we're doing are making sure that it's actually comfortable to use even once the controls are on the screen. So if you're using the current client, you'll know that the mute and the hang up buttons are up here in the corner. Well, this device can actually be jacked up probably about that height. And if I have the device jacked up, then that means that mute and hang up, I would have to literally jump to reach. And so, you know, I don't want to have to high-five the display every time I want to do something with it. So we moved all the controls down low. And so when you're on one of these larger devices, you don't have to, you know, do a jump shot in order to be able to use the controls. So it's not something that you would necessarily see if you're using one of the smaller devices. It probably wouldn't even occur to you that we were making some of these changes. But when you see them on these larger devices, it kind of becomes apparent, oh, that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? Likewise, if you were to use this in a shared environment, let's say you're probably not going to have one of these 82-inch monsters sitting in every office. You might have them in a few offices, but you're probably not going to have them in every office, and you want to use these in some place that's kind of a shared environment. Users probably aren't going to necessarily know how to navigate some of the conversation controls in terms of switching between conversations and things like that. And you don't want them just leaving conversations hanging, right? You don't want to have 15 conversations all stacked up in the background. So one of the things we added is just the easy way to, hey, I just want to leave the conversation. I'm done. And again, that's nice for everybody because on the smaller sizes, before if you wanted to leave a conversation, you'd hang up, then you got to edge swipe, which you'd probably like, how did I do that? You'd have to edge swipe, kill the conversation, and then you're out. And so this way you don't have to do any of that. It's just direct. I'm done with this conversation. I don't need to deal with it anymore. The bot is just giving me the lovely audio recording of my conversation here. So that's what that is, and the screen's kind of flickering this morning. But it's small touches like that we want to make sure that we're putting into the experience. Something else that we want to make sure that we have a good experience on is the meetings environment. Man, this is having some trouble here. So if you let me get one. Yeah, if you were looking at the meetings environment and you're looking at some of your scheduled meetings before, we were actually kind of at the cutting edge of what Windows 8 could accommodate for us when we first shipped. There were some controls that they were still working on when we were working. In fact, the Windows team actually has told us several times that this app is the most complicated app that's in the Windows Store. And they use it to test out a number of their APIs. And so we're constantly pushing the edge of what you can do in a modern app. And so one of the things that we had to settle on when we first shipped is if you ever took a look, or if you look now, the experience here with the meeting details. It's nice to have the meeting details, but the formatting is kind of strange. It's kind of crazy because it takes this HTML and converts it to text, and then it tries to take out white spaces, and it doesn't look very good. And so again, if you're trying to use this even on a small device or on a large device, you want something a little nicer than that. And so what we did, let me see if I can find another one. Yeah, here you go. So what we did is we corrected that. We made sure that the experience was good in the meetings details. So this is actually all HTML. It can render HTML. And then again, small little details. We want to make sure that images, for instance, are culled out, because if somebody forwards you something and it has an image in it, you don't want that necessarily being downloaded, or some disclosure that somebody is actually looking through the material. So we strip out images. But other than that, it's all now nice HTML control, so it's nicely formatted, and it looks right, and it looks professional, particularly on these large devices. And so this experience is pretty nice, particularly if you're somebody like me. At 10:30, I have 5 meetings, right? And so which one am I going to go to? This allows you to choose from that. Let's go back to the conversation experience here. Let's see here. Let's add that back in. Let's invite some more people. Let's see if we can find. He's not in my list. Let's see if Jason will answer. I see him in the back of the room. He better answer. Yeah, you're not inactive. You're back there. I see you. So you can see things like the presenters and attendees now show up in the roster, so we have some control over that, right? And we can move people around. So if I want to know a little bit, so you also see that now Jason is a presenter. So there's no reason to differentiate between who is not a presenter. But, I don't like Jason very much, so I'm going to demote him. Now he's an attendee. And if I don't want to hear from him, I'm going to mute him. Okay, let's hear from Jason again. I can unmute. All very direct experience. There's no digging around. Although the experience is good in the Win32 client, again, because we're touch controlled, we want to make sure that we're simplifying the experience, and we're making it very direct and easy for people to get, so that they're not having to swipe around and do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And so we're constantly looking for things in the experience like that. So oh, you're not going to share video? All right, Jason, I see how it is. So there's some other nice little affordances if you're using this in this type of a form factor. For instance, you can switch it to the other side. So that's a little known Windows OS, the Windows arrow keys. You can actually move apps around. So there's little nice things like that. So if you're giving a presentation and you don't want to stand in front of the content or the people that you're talking to, you can just move it around. So it's, again, a nice experience there. It's the Windows and then the arrow keys. Yep. Let's see here. And so you can give some pretty slick presentations this way. If you're presenting material and you have people remote and you have a projector, you don't even need to have a screen, that's touch enabled, but you have a projector. You can have a nice experience this way. It's laid out. It's not distracting. You can have video on the side for the remote participants. And so when you guys are thinking about how to use the Windows 8 client, really, I think it's don't limit yourselves. Don't just think about, what can I get done on a desktop that I'm doing every day, where I'm just trying to IM people for presentations, or maybe I'm working on a deck or some email. I mean, those are great experiences. Those are everyday experiences. But there are actually some really nice meetings experiences that you can craft pretty easily with the Windows 8 client. Being able to walk into a presentation, do the one touch to join, have it nice and snapped, have your video participants going over there, being able to resize to any size that you want if there's content or something that somebody's sharing. That's pretty nice. That's pretty powerful. And then if you happen to be lucky enough to get one of these PPI devices, then you get a nice experience on that. You get a nice multi-touch experience. So just don't stand too close. You can get pretty dizzy if you sit here and do this. And the other thing that I would recommend with these is if you do use them, you can't really tell from here, and I'm being nice to you since it's 8:30 in the morning. If you get this full thing loaded up with something that's flat white, you will feel the light coming off of this thing. It is a huge screen. Even the 55-inch screens are pretty bright. It's like looking into a spotlight. So we're constantly thinking about things like that, like, okay, maybe we shouldn't use 100% white. We should use like a gray tone so we don't burn people's eyeballs out of the back of their head. And there's other experiences that you'll see over time coming. Things like, if I'm on a screen this size, I don't want to have to walk across the room in order to do a swipe, because a swipe on that is this big. If I scale it up, a swipe here is like 2 feet, right? So I think you'll be seeing some experiences around that. That's pretty nice. So with that, since you guys have been very good at being patient, any questions or anything that you guys want to bounce off of me? Anything curious? Yeah, sure.
I think I remember the first time I tried this app.
Yep.
There was a phone number, for example, in a web browser page or something. I wasn't able to trigger Lync.
Yep.
Make the group.
Yep.
Skype.
Yep.
Is it possible now?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Let me see if I can. Well, I don't have it set up here, but yes, it is. So one of the scenarios that we have that we added with Windows 8.1 is Windows gave us more control over the sizes that we could launch to, and so one of the things that we did is we made sure that with IE, if you were to tap a phone number or URI, say a join link, anything like that. That we came up snapped, because we figured, oh, well, your primary task is whatever you're clicking on. That's the thing that you're interested in. You want to have a conversation with somebody, but you probably don't want to start out in full screen. So we come up in snap view. And so we specifically did a lot of testing around that in terms of making sure that the experience is good and that you can tap a telephone number and it launches. So that should work. If you see that there's a problem with it, it might be that Skype is battling out with Lync for the protocol handler, but if you have it associated correctly, it should work just fine. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes. Is there any development doing on the old version, on the desktop version? Are you working on that, or is it all focused on this focus from Microsoft side?
Oh no, we're definitely doing a lot of work on the desktop version. So you don't have to worry about the pace of development there. We've released, I believe, 4 different releases for the desktop, and so I'm kind of an outpost in terms of the development, the program management team, because most of the people that sit around me actually work on the desktop client. So we're definitely doing work in there. The desktop client, it's releasing quarterly, but it's still part of Office, and so there's still when the Lync client comes out, it still has some ties to the Office refreshes, right, for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so you'll see some of the things coming out more in that timeline, and so yes, you don't have to worry about that.
What is your best practice in the Office? What should the person, worker, in which direction should we push them? Should they use the app or should they use the desktop client? Because if you have both installed, they are calling, someone is calling, it's like, where to answer?
Right, you get kind of bombarded with notifications. No, definitely understand. So that's one of the things we are working on with the OS team is to improve the notification experience and the coexistence experience. You'll have the same problem with Outlook. There was a special affordance that was put in for Outlook so that it kind of minimized the number of notifications that you get for emails, but you can get a lot. The recommendation that I would have, honestly, is use the right client for the device. So if you're sitting at a normal PC and you're doing regular productivity worker tasks, probably your best bet is to use the Win32 client, just because it integrates well with the rest of the apps that you're using there. I mean, you're using all taskbar apps, right? And so that's probably going to be the experience most people gravitate towards on that particular endpoint. They could use the modern client if they like it for whatever reason. There's less information in terms of exposed to the user, so it's kind of an easier experience to navigate. It doesn't do as much, but it's an easier experience to navigate. But if you're on a touch device, like if somebody has a HP tablet, or if they have a Nokia 2520 or Surface or any of those, I think you probably want to have that sort of a touch experience there. In terms of the uptake that we see, one of the things that people are always curious about is how much is Windows 8 actually is being used. And so a few fun facts. There are actually now more Windows 8 desktops or devices and desktops in the world than there are OS X devices. So we just crossed that threshold. So there are more devices that can access this experience than there are Macs that are running out in the world today. Yeah, so we have folks that run around with those, and that like a Yoga or a tablet that can flip around. Dell XPS 12, I think, is another one. They sometimes run both, and so if they're running in a tablet experience, like if you bring that to a meeting, you can run LMX. You can turn the screen around. You can kind of just have a drop-in meeting experience with other people, and it's nice because there's not other stuff on the screen. It's kind of helpful. But if you have if you have a traditional laptop layout with the keyboard and everything open, and you're working in Win32 land, you might not want that, right? Especially on a smaller device.
But your promise is that if I have both installed here, it will improve this matter that everything is calling at the same time.
No, that's not my promise.
I'm sitting at the desktop using the desktop version,
Right.
and then I take it to the office, and then I want to maybe use the app.
Yep.
But still, when I'm in the office, this both call is calling.
Yep. Yep. So the hybrid devices, it's a little harder, right? Because you don't want to be sitting there installing and uninstalling. One thing you can do is you can just sign out on the modern client if you're not going to use it. That way you're not getting bombarded by notifications. But yeah, that's kind of the tough environment that you can get yourself into, is if you have both clients running, you're going to get more notifications. That's my life. I run both clients all the time because I do work in both places. So I see it every day. I'm very well aware of it, and we're trying to improve on that. That's something that we have to have a little help from the OS team. It's not something that we can just fix in Lync as its own. And so, that if I could get rid of it right now, I'd get rid of it right now. But yeah. Oh, we're very, very, very aware of it. Yeah, we know about it. Other questions?
Regarding that, I thought there was a setting where first time you launched it, it asked you which application you want to use for meetings, and I thought it was one or the other. You're saying you can actually log into both and they can both be running?
Yeah, you can log into both. They can both be running. You can go into Windows. Windows will associate those links with one client or the other. It depends on the order in which you install them. So if you install the desktop client first and then you install the modern client, I believe it leaves it alone. You may get a nag when the next time you go to the desktop client. It'll ask you, hey, I'm not the default client. Do you want me to be the default client? And you can reassociate it that way. And so you have control over it. You definitely have control over it. The thing that I find is I use and this might be helpful to you, I use the join links actually infrequently. Mainly because if you've been keeping up with the desktop releases, one of the things that we changed in the desktop release is we have the meetings environment now in the desktop client. And so I don't really have much reason to go back over to Outlook and start digging around. I just go to the client, find the meeting, join it there. And so if I'm joining a conference where I'm not presenting and I want to use LMX, then I can go I can do that one touch to join from the start screen. Or if I know that I want to do application sharing, say I'm working with the team and I'm wanting to show them something in a web browser, then I just go to the desktop app and join from there. And that way I know just exactly which one I'm getting at any particular time. So that's something that we definitely use quite a bit.
The meetings integration now, is that something that was just released? Is that an update that we would?
Yeah, it should be in an update. So.
And as far as the Exchange environment, does the Exchange environment have to be up to 2013 as well?
No, there's nothing special about the Exchange setup on this. It does have to support EWS, so I think you have to have at least 2010. Exchange 2010. It might be there on 2007, I think. I'd have to check on that. But if you're running a really old version of Exchange, it probably doesn't have EWS, and so then it won't work. But yeah, you don't have to have the very latest and greatest in order to do that. It's the same It's the same mechanism that we use on the mobile client to grab the meetings on the mobile client. So, you know, if you have the mobile client, you can get to it. You should be able to get to it through any of the other clients. Other questions?
Follow on to that one. The Exchange Web Services meant on that one. Obviously, that has the security guys more than a little concerned exposing EWS out to the internet with mobile devices. And is there a reason that you guys went down that path versus reading the calendar on the device or something like that?
Oh, for the mobile devices?
Both mobile and the 8. So.
Oh, okay. The reason that we went that path is because the desktop client actually started us out in that direction, where we used to use Mappy in order to grab the information, and people quite honestly hated it. It worked not so great. When we did, I think, yeah. And so we had to do a lot of actual engineering. That was one of my headaches to have to solve. We had to do a lot of the special engineering to get around that, to get away from Mappy. And so the mechanism that was available for us was the EWS mechanism on the Exchange server. So we started using that directly. And so that's why it does what it does, is actually when we moved away from Mappy, we moved over to EWS. And so we had a lot of code and experience with using that. And so when it came time to add the meetings environment, it was simply a choice of, hey, we can grab this information through EWS. It's there. It's exposed. It's not an additional interface that you guys have to set up and provision and support. You know, it's a standard interface. Anybody can code to it, and it allowed us to spend more time on the other features that you guys asked for than trying to build a separate pipe back into Exchange. So that's what we've built off of for the time being. If you guys have any particular concerns, Jason right there behind you is the mobile guy, so you can let him know if there's something in particular around DWS security and mobile that would be helpful. Other questions? All right. Well, if you guys have anything else that pops in your head, just don't hesitate. Feel free to come and grab me. If you want to come up and tinker around with the PPI device, it's kind of a nice experience. Feel free, and thanks for coming out this morning. I appreciate it.